due to LoL Esports on their Fantasy LCS listing Krepo as being on Elements, I almost said Alliance there, it's suggested that for at least for a temporary basis, he'll join Elements, he'll play, maybe he's a sub, maybe he's going to start just for the initial weeks, maybe he's the permanent replacement for Nif, we don't know. But since it's a topic anyway that had been bandied around and people had suggested that Nif should be the player removed and they suggested that Krepo would be the player they wanted brought in, it was a topic I had already thought about anyway, and I thought you could probably make a video out of this because first and foremost, you have to look at the fact that the way people presented why Krepo was the ideal person brought into question a lot of topics about how people think about the game, assumptions they make, sometimes based on very little information, just based on things they've heard other people say or things that they just imagine themselves, and then they think, wouldn't that be great? Or hey, that's the way things should work. Or well, if someone's good in this area, it only makes sense they'd be great in this area over here. And we're going to break all this down right now. Now, first and foremost, let's just take a quick look at Elements, because I did this recently in a video that was about Kevin replacing Wicked, where I just looked at Elements and I said, like, what are the problems in this team? Because before you talk about replacing someone, you want to ask yourself, like, was the person who was in the team before a primary one of the problems? Is the person they're bringing in someone who's going to solve the problems? Now, the way I broke it down for Elements is the first place that you have to start with Elements is actually shot calling. Now, it's no coincidence that they've changed shot callers around. They've gone from Froggen, they've gone over to Nif. They've always had this problem, their whole history with shot calling. Even in the season where they won 75% of their games against every opponent, they had this issue with shot calling where they're hesitant, they're indecisive. They just get into situations where, given the option of being reactive and taking a battle or being proactive and deciding a battle, they'll fall into this middle ground where they're not really doing either. And then they just kind of wait until they get forced into a situation where they have to have a fight, or they'll eventually give in and make some sort of choice. And as a result, because it's not really done with kind of like a prevailing philosophy behind it, a real rationale, that in the moment you could stop time and go, why are you about to do this right now? I'm not sure they could give you good answers, actually. And so it feels like when they win, they're not entirely sure what they did in terms of shot calling and strategical approach that made them win. And when they lose, they can look at things and go, oh, well, we shouldn't have done that. We shouldn't have done this. Yeah, but in the moment, did you know that? Did you really have a sense of, like, this could be a bad decision right now? Did you even know? Could you even evaluate within that moment? I'm not sure they could, actually, as a team. And so it doesn't surprise me that they've been a bit indecisive about even how they've approached the shot calling issue within the team. Then you go from shot calling to coaching. Now, I brought this up in the past one about the issue of them not watching replays. Apparently, I'll just correct this now. Wicked told me that basically means they only watched 5 replays as a team. Like, people individually watched themselves play, etc. But they didn't as a team watch it. But this brings up a larger coaching issue. I mean, we heard on Summoning Insight that apparently the coach is a guy who's a Dota guy. He's not necessarily got a background in League of Legends. And even though some of it was said jokingly, it sounds like he's still adapting to the ideas of League of Legends, and some of the aspects of it are different from Dota and that have very, very particular just to League of Legends and have nothing to do with other games. Because there's coaching in terms of telling people when to practice and all that sort of stuff. But then if you're going to coach in-game aspects, which I actually think if you're not an expert about League of Legends, you should probably have an analyst giving you the information for that. I don't think a guy who doesn't know about the game should attempt to coach in the game stuff, as in just look at stuff and go, well, to me it seems obvious that we should try this. Like, when you've got really good professional players in that sense, I don't think you should be able to do that unless you have some sort of game background authority in that respect. Like, if you are a Monte Cristo, or if you were someone like Jat or Loco Doco or Papa Smithy, let me think, who else would be in this category? Deficio, if he used to become a coach. These sorts of people could actually have a real basis from what they've seen and their knowledge of the game and how things interact to really talk to a player and tell him, no, I want you to do it this way. I'm not so sure in Element's case, if that's what the coach does, that that's a position for him to be in. Now, and yet, in terms of the shot calling set, we can see that they're having issues in terms of, like, pick order, pick ban, who they're forcing onto certain champions, who they're prioritizing in terms of getting the champions for, their understanding of what comp they want in terms of, like, well, how are we going to engage the fights here? Are we going to be the ones who disengage? Like, sometimes they seem a bit confused in that respect. That's why the coaching issue comes up for me. Then you look at some of the players. Now, yeah, Wicked had his problems at times. He would have some good games, but he would have problems where he would stand out and be someone who made some misplays or within the fights. Here's the thing about Wicked. I might one day make a video just about him. Because I don't think it's that Wicked was a bad player. I've never thought that. I just thought Wicked doesn't fit with the style of play that Alliance has. Now, that might sound funny, because when everyone sees Alliance and they say they're too passive, and I made this point in the last video, it's more that they're indecisive, not they're too passive. But it's not just that they're too passive in that sense. And so you'd think, well, how do you fix the passive problem? Well, put in aggressive players. Wicked's an aggressive player. No, it's not that. It's more like the players have to synergize in terms of the style. It's not just that you put aggressive players with passive players. It's like you have to put certain types of those players in, and it depends on position as well, especially how they're going to interact. Like, you can obviously have a passive support with an aggressive AD carry, and it can work very well if you know what you're doing there. So Wicked was potentially one of the problems. They've replaced him with Kevin. So far, hard to really know what to make of that so far. He did good in the first game that lost. Didn't do very well in the second game. Only 2 games in. Reckless has been an issue in as much as he's getting these great stat lines still, but he's not doing that much damage, and he seems to have some sort of issue. It's not even just that he doesn't do damage. It's that the way he plays, and apparently from what happened on Nith on Sounding Insight, it sounds like he's getting some pick priorities and getting some first picks. If you're going to give him that sort of focus and that sort of attention, is he necessarily earning his keep in that respect? Is he having the game impact that he should as a star player and someone who's a primary focal point of our team? That's the question there. I'm not sure he's the biggest problem in any sense. I think that can be fixed. I think he can be a very good player within the context of their team. I think people have gone too far the other way on that one. In terms of Shook, I don't think that's ever really been addressed. He still has the exact same problems he always had, where he would play certain champions, be beasts on them. He'd play certain other champions and just do next to nothing on it, or if he gets behind in a certain way, do next to nothing. And I think a problem for Shook this season, this split rather, as to why he's been behind it, etc. more, is because some of those champions, he can't just pick Lee Sin all the time now. That's not the meta at the moment. So he can't just have like that go-to godlike band-aid champion in the same way as Wicked could get the Aurelia, do awesome, and we'd all forget, don't worry about it. As long as he gets Aurelia, it's fine. Well, in this sense, Shook doesn't have that same luxury. Now he has to play some of these other champions, Rek'Sai or whatever. This is a new meta for him in that sense. Moving beyond elements and some of their issues. And so, okay, let's bring up Nif actually. As a shot caller, it didn't make much sense to have Nif be the shot caller. I'm not sure what the decision there was from the coaching staff or what. In terms of, they have lacked for a shot caller in general. Support position in general, I think is a good position to have it from. Support or jungler seem like the best two to have. Because you have a bit more time to think. You have a bit more chance to look around the map. You're in general more focused on vision and awareness. These qualities are all great. You're already in theory used to giving information and taking information from other players. These all make sense as general roles. But Nif's personality is not a shot calling personality. He's not the guy who's going to have the final word, who's going to make that decisive call. It's just not who he is as a person. So I don't think that made sense. As a player, Nif did have some bad games this split, but I don't think he was ever like some massive sore point. I think it's more the fact that Reckless having his issues in terms of taking even advantages in lane and turning it into something in the game, or getting enough of an advantage in ahead in lane when he had opportunities. I think Reckless's problems and diminished impact compared to when he was in Fnatic, combined with Nif's smaller issues, the combination's not been that good. I'll definitely say that much. So going forwards, let's look at Krepo. What we'll do is we'll look at Krepo as a player and the things he brings, and then we'll kind of look at the same time how it would work on elements. So people are thinking to themselves, like I said, number one problem there, elements, shot calling. Not players, number one problem, shot calling. People are thinking to themselves, right, great, well, Krepo can come right in and he can be a shot caller and he can be the primary shot caller, and then they've got good players on elements, so things will all turn around and they'll start winning again. That's great, except is Krepo a shot caller? Now, everyone who's watching this now who thinks, well, yeah, that's why we just said he'll be the shot caller, right? Oh, really? What's that based on? What teams has he shot called for? Well, did he shot call EG? And maybe in CLG.EU had something. No, let me just clear this up for you. Krepo has never been the primary shot caller of any professional level League of Legends team that I'm aware of. That's CLG.EU, Evil Geniuses, and then the Evil Geniuses that went to NA. As far as I know, he was never the primary shot caller of any of these teams. Let's think about this. In CLG.EU, now here's what's very interesting here, because people get confused about this. Remember when those Krepo, Snoopy, and Yellow Pete went off to NA to form their Evil Geniuses, and Wicked and Froggen had Alliance in Europe, and Alliance started off terribly. Meanwhile, Evil Geniuses, it's not they were doing well, but they'd gotten into an ALCS, and the first couple of games wasn't utterly terrible. I remember there was this certain trend of people who used to be fans of EG, and maybe they were fans of people like Snoopy and Krepo, who were the bigger personalities and who were the ones most beloved by personality-driven fans who had the emotional connection with them. There was a sort of resentment from those fans who now weren't fans of Alliance and were fans of Evil Genius, who said along the lines of, like, when Alliance was doing badly, they said, yeah, well, that's what you get for picking the mechanical players, Wicked and Froggen, who were always known as the strong skill players, over the brains, the shot calling element of your team. And look, they're over there and they're going to do well. Meanwhile, you guys, you've got all the mechanics, but you can't do anything. You don't have any shot calling, no brains. You know, it's like a brains versus brawn type thing. In reality, that was never the case. In there, first of all, as I kind of alluded to before, in terms of roles, jungle and support to a degree should have more say in shot calling. It just makes more sense within how a team's set up in a perfect world. But you saw from the way their careers went over in NA, it's not like they had some godlike shot calling and they were like some Cloud9 type team and then they took like lesser players. Because remember, if you've got great shot calling, you don't need as skilled players. You don't have to brute force it. And then they made magic things happen. They never had any good placings in any LCS ever. They played in 3 splits, not all the players. Let me think, did they play in 3 splits? No, they played in 2 splits and they never had a single good placing once. And they were down in relegation every single time. And that's it. There wasn't any great shot calling either to watch. In fact, if you remember, there was a famous game where they played CLG.EU. They played CLG North America and they traded their whole base for the Baron and lost the game. But got the Baron buff, so congrats. This was not a good team in terms of shot calling, the Evil Geniuses one. Yes, Alliance wasn't good in terms of shot calling either. But what I'm bringing up here is, I'm making a general trend to now tie into this point that CLG.EU is a great example of a team that didn't have primary shot calling. It's not that there was 1 or 2 persons who was the shot caller that made that team great. This was the number 1 example I've ever seen in the West of a team that was very good. Remember, this team beat Moscow 5 in their prime and won DreamHack Summer. They went to the final of OGN and were a game from winning OGN over like Azubu Frost, this godlike team, and had beaten Najin Sword in the semi-final 3-1. They went to the semi-final of Worlds and again, 1 game from reaching the final of Worlds. This was an incredible team, one of the best teams of all time from the West. And yet this team did not have any primary shot calling. In fact, it was the closest I've ever seen to democratic committee-based shot calling. And I've done tons of interviews with those players during this time and after, where they even would say, no, well, our style is democratic. Like, when a moment comes up, we ask questions like, can we do this now? Shall we do this now? And depending on, I mean, first of all, they used to sort of say, like, to a degree, it was like, who said it more loud? Like, yes, do that now, or don't do that now. And the idea is, whoever said it with more certainty in their voice, they thought to themselves, like, well, he must have, like, the better information in this moment, we'll do that. Or it would go on committee, like, okay, well, 3 out of the 5 of us wanted it, right, let's do it. And they would decide this way. And the problem was, with their style and with the meta back then, without a lot of primary shot callers, without a lot of people who understood vision control and that aspect entirely, and so could be these very effective shot callers in the West, because the West didn't have a lot. Without that, they could get away with this. Because first of all, their style was predicated on not having a lot of these engagements early on, taking key engagements, but in general, going for the late game, picking out scaling champions, getting to the late game, and then being really good at coordinated team fighting. And in that sense, they didn't need as much shot calling as other teams. In fact, I would describe them almost as the anti-shot calling team. This was the team where they would get in these situations and then either when they had problems, there would be discussion going on and they wouldn't be able to decisively take advantage of an opportunity because there'd still be discussion, or maybe two people just said, no, let's not do it. And then they didn't get the window of opportunity and seize it. Or there would be times when they just didn't make a decision at all and they were sort of like, nah, just back off, never mind. But they always knew, it's okay, our style is we'll go for the late game, we can just play safe, just hold on, we'll get another opportunity this. And they would be able to win those late game team fights. They were one of the best teams at late game team fighting. That was one of their strengths. And during season 2, they had the best player as well. So they had the best player who'd be super farmed up, they'd get 6 items onto him, and he was playing super broken AP champions who'd wreck you completely in the team fight. So that whole combination all there worked. My point I'm making is Krepo was not some primary shot caller in CLG.EU. In fact, this team didn't embrace that approach. And even in season 3, when they were having these problems in the first split, I was doing interviews with them and they still sort of suggested that, like, no, we're going to stick with this democratic approach. We don't think you need like a Reaper style one-man shot caller. They'd even bring up that old argument, which is on one level true, which is like, you know, one in-game leader / shot caller can't know all the information in the game. He has imperfect information. Therefore, in an ideal world, if you had 5 people who had all the information and then they could sort of work together and have a good synergy on how to make the decision together as 5 people, that would be superior. That's correct. The problem is that is actually more unlikely to find than a really amazing godlike shot caller who can do a lot of it himself. We get some of those in the world. The difference is, I've yet to see this team where they don't have a single shot caller, but all 5 have full autonomy themselves, transmit perfect information of what they have, and make a decision together decisively in the moment with a rationale, a coherent philosophy behind it that works. That is so rare that, as far as I know, it has never existed. Now, what's interesting is that's what used to make the battle between Moscow 5 and CLG.EU so compelling. Because not only was CLG.EU this late game style team, which is contrasted against Moscow 5, was the team that would shut you down so hard that you would, if they hadn't already won the game, people were surrendering at 20 minutes at IEM Hanover, that big event that they won in March of 2012. They were the opposite. They were like the antithesis of the CLG style. They were the style where, if anything, they proved what is great about solitary shot calling, where when a shot call was made and they decided to go in, everyone followed up no matter what. There was no discussion of like, I don't think that's good, let's back off, let's not do that, another chance will come. They were the team where it's like, no, okay, we go in now, we do it no matter what. And listen, maybe they went sometimes to the other extreme because it was so high feet of fight, and luckily they were also amazing at team fighting, so they could come from behind and make up for bad shot calls. But at least with that approach, you could have broken it down, as I often say, after the game and see, oh, right, this is what we did wrong there. But the idea is you always want the process to be whatever the call is, that's what we have to do. And after the fact, we can figure out if it's wrong and try and fix it so that next time the call's better, but we can't discuss and debate in the game. So anyway, that's a general point I'm making there, that Krepo did not have that influence there. In Evil Geniuses, again, he wasn't the primary shot caller. I think at times they said Snoopy was, which makes sense, he was the jungler. This is a scenario where, as far as I can tell, you look at some of the comms, you look at some of the explanations and the interview stuff. He isn't the primary shot caller. He's not playing this role. Maybe he has a contribution in it. Maybe he talks about strategy outside of the game, picks we're going to do. Maybe he contributes information. This certainly all sounds plausible, but he wasn't the primary shot caller of EG. And besides, if I were him, I'd go ahead and say you weren't, because you wouldn't want to hold that up and by the way, on my resume, I was the shot caller of Evil Geniuses. What, that shit team that could barely do anything? Yep, that was me. Like that, I wouldn't want that on my fucking billboard. So it wasn't. So as far as we can tell, shot caller in no teams whatsoever. Now, why do people think he was the shot caller? Why do people think he would be a great shot caller now, with no basis, by the way? Mainly, as far as I can tell, because Krepo is really good on analysis desks. So when he goes to like Worlds, or he even did it at one of the IEM events, when he's on the analysis desk there and he breaks down like build paths of supports, how the vision control was set up, how a lane matchup went in bot lane here, which champions people should have picked, he's really good at breaking stuff down for analysis there. He's really good at kind of figuring out what a team should have done. Guess what role he's best suited for based on that? Analyst, coach. Those are two roles he'd be really good at. That's what that suggests he's good at. Now, people have made a mistake there thinking that means the way he's eloquent and articulate and breaking down the game and suggesting things and figuring out what went wrong quickly after the fact suggests that he'd be a good shot caller. That's a different skill set entirely. The skill set of knowing after the fact and once something's happened, being able to evaluate what happened, analyze why it happened, figure out possible ways to fix it, etc., is a very different skill set from being able to shot call. Because being able to shot call is being able to read in that second what's happening, what's likely to happen next, what you can do, and then selecting from what you can do, this toolkit, this playbook of options, the correct one right now, not just perfect, like in a perfect world this is exactly what would shut them down, but the correct one based on what we have here, what we can do, the tools we have to work with, and what the opponent's likely to do. That's a very broad skill set that not any one shot caller is going to have all of the qualities in, and yet we don't actually know. We have no evidence this far, just based on him on analysis desk and in teams, that Krepo has any of these skills here. We know he can do stuff after the fact, which is very different. And the reason why I bring that up is because there have been examples of people who had the skill set of Krepo on the analysis desk there who wouldn't make good in-game shot callers. A great example, by the way, would be Chauster. I mean, he actually is supposed to say his name Chauster because his name's like Steve Chow from China, but whatever, I've got it in my mind it's Chauster. Not least because I'm from England and Chaucer is written like not that dissimilar, and that's the way we pronounce it in England, Chaucer. And that's an English word, and he's from China, apparently, so I'm going to go with my pronunciation. So Chauster is someone where it's actually a mistake to think that Chauster had bad ideas about League of Legends and didn't know what he was doing. Chauster had phenomenal ideas about League of Legends. One of the most utterly unique thinkers I think I've ever encountered in League. had a totally unique perspective that was totally consistent and totally coherent to his philosophy, his ideals, things that he'd discovered about the game before other people understood them. He was one of the first people I ever saw back in the day where people were just playing standard meta lanes, just trying to win their lane 1v1 and snowball it, and then just get in a group, fight for the dragon and win team fights. That's all a lot of teams were doing, and already he understood minion control. He understood how to apply pressure on the map just in terms of towers and minion pressure, building up waves. He understood a lot of these qualities way before Western people did, a lot of them. He was taking ideas that like the Asians were coming onto, but from their own different angle. He had a really good mind for the game. And after a game, he could do like this analysis Krepo style on the analysis desk, where he could take the game and he could tell you right afterwards, here's the picks that we did wrong. Like, now that I saw that, like, I could see we should have done this instead. That would have been the counter there. In the game, this was a bad decision we made. If we'd have done this instead, it would have given us a better up. He could break it all down like that. Yet he was repeatedly the primary shot caller in CLG. And it repeatedly was not only not good, it was utterly terrible. Their style was maybe even worse than the overall approach of the committee. Because first of all, his personality didn't fit it. He wasn't the guy who wanted to take the responsibility and be like, listen, this is my call I'm making right now. Everyone just do this call no matter what. What's funny is, I got to listen to his comms when Monty was the coach of CLG, because he was playing as the support in summer split of 2013, and Chauster was the in-game leader, and yet he would shot call like this, like could we do the dragon now? Could we do? And he would just ask questions all the time, and he wouldn't make a whole lot of decisions. In fact, we couldn't tell the first few scrims we watched who the shot caller actually was. We had to ask them who's the shot caller in this team, and we were listening to the fucking comms in the game. We couldn't tell who it was because the way it was done was not done in the shot calling manner I'm saying, where you make the decisions, then you fix it afterwards, and then you discuss what could have done differently, and you have this decisive process of everyone knowing that when this is done, we all follow up on this call. That wasn't there. And so in the same sense, is Krepo's personality one that would fit doing a shot call like this? Would he want to take this responsibility? And then if you lose, people can say, you did the wrong shot call, you called that wrong, you fucked all that up. Is he someone who's that sort of person? As far as I can tell at the moment, briefly, I don't think he is. I think Krepo's the sort of guy who, after the fact, likes to break it down and look at what went wrong. And then he wants, from the CLG.EU days and Evil Geniuses, how that went badly in Evil Geniuses, and then from CLG.EU in terms of how they broke down the shot caller thing, I think he actually liked that approach where it's like, it's not one person's responsibility that we made the wrong call here. It's like, as a team, we couldn't figure it out. We lost, we win as a team, we lose as a team. That sort of a mentality, okay. I don't think he wants to be the guy where we can all, if they lose a bunch of games, we can be like, Krepo, you're a shit shot caller, you're fucking that up all the time. I'm not sure he embraces that sort of responsibility. Now, it's also, incidentally, and I purposely say incidentally, a case that he came on Summoning Insight. We essentially put this question to him a few episodes back. Let me think, was it like 30, maybe 34 or 35 was the one with Krepo on? He literally said, like, I'm not the shot caller, like I can't, I think he even said he didn't want to or couldn't be a shot caller. Like he said something like he could give good information in a game, but he couldn't like gather it all together and make a call and play his position. Like he even said, I know he said about Mata, but I think he might have said about Yellow Star as well, that this is something he really admired about these players, that they could play their position at a good level with their lane partner and take in information from people and make shot calls and take responsibility for all of this and have good vision control. This was incredible to him. I could see why he marvels at it, because I marvel at it when I see Mata do it or I see Yellow Star do it in his team. He said that in the case. Now listen, that doesn't mean he can't be a good shot caller. It doesn't mean he's not suited to it. It doesn't mean that he even necessarily entirely thinks that. He might have just said that for whatever reasons. He might have just thought that at the time. He might actually find out that he's really good. That's why I say incidentally. That's what, just because someone says something, I don't know why this would even be a point I have to make, but it is in the world of League of Legends. If I say something like, I don't think Wicked works really well with Shook, and they're like, no, Shook said in an interview he does work with another one. Like, oh, well, if he says that, then that's case closed. Oh, I had all these theories and stuff, but there we go. Lock it up. Shook said it's all great. What if Shook's lying? It's impossible. If he says something, it must be like, come on, man. You have to actually just take people's opinion and weight it, yes, and give it some value if it comes from someone inside. But that's not the be-all and end-all. And it doesn't invalidate your own life's experiences, analysis, and observation. It doesn't invalidate that. It should add to it or inform it. Now, in this particular case, I think there's probably something to it. I think he was being quite honest when he said that. He was trying to assess his own skills and be reasonable. So now that we've done that aspect, could he be the shot caller? I think actually he could. Oh my goodness, all this way I've come round full circle and he could be one. The difference is he's not going to be some saviour shot caller who's going to be amazing and who's going to be a Reapered, Mata, Yellow Star god who's going to come in and call everything and it's going to fix all elements shot calling problems. With that said, since they don't have a shot caller, since as far as I can tell, nobody in this team is suitable to be the shot caller, I think of everyone, if Krepo's going to be in the lineup, he's the one I'd pick. Now, whether he'd do a really good job, I think he'd do an okay job. I think an okay job might even be enough to make elements a bit better. That's all great. I don't expect him to be some phenomenal shot caller. I also don't yet know the personality issue. I don't yet know whether he's a sort of person who wants to embrace that, because if you embrace that, it has to come with the negative of it. Yeah, we give you credit when you make the sick call that wins the game. But to get the credit that you get for the sick call to win the game, we have to also get the blame sometimes when you lose the game. And that sometimes, by the way, is going to be unfair, because sometimes you'll have made the correct call as an in the moment with the information you had and what people told you and what you thought you could do, that you did make the right call, but it was misexecuted. Like a player on your team can fuck it up. Like, let's say you call this particular fight that if everyone had fought properly and focused, you would have won this fight and it would turn the whole game. But let's say, for hypothetical reasons, in this fight, Reckless just plays extra indecisive or extra hesitant, and there's a moment where he thinks to himself, unbeknownst to you and how the rest of you are focusing someone, I think this team fight's going to go badly. Like, I think they're going to die in this section. And he just decides, he stops committing. He just moves out of the fight. You've got one less person do damage. The fight just collapses away. He gets away. You get 4 deaths, 3 deaths on your side. Now, in this scenario, aside from the fact that in an ideal world you would know what Reckless is going to do, but you can't always. You might get blamed for being the shot caller who made the bad call there. And why did you fight there? You never would have won that. But actually, you might know that you would have won it. And you might know that in fact, in scrims, maybe Reckless did go in there. Maybe he was more aggressive. Maybe even in past games, his trend was he was a little bit more assertive there. And he just wasn't in this one case. You're going to get the blame for that. So you have to be, essentially, it's like being the manager of a sports team. Sometimes you can be a good manager, and if you have the wrong team, or you have a team that just doesn't buy into your philosophy, or they just play poorly, you'll get the blame, you'll get the sack, even though you might have actually done a wonderful job. Now, going on from that, let's talk about the aspect of, well, Krepo will bring like a mature vocal presence to the team, and it'll fix a lot of those issues of like people being too quiet, or, you know, they needed like a leader, emotional leader. Again, I don't see Krepo as an emotional leader. And I say that based on seeing him in other teams where he didn't have the status of like, this is the primary leader type guy. I mean, maybe in the latter Evil Geniuses because they had a lot of young and inexperienced players. But in CLG.EU, no, not the primary leader at all. Not the biggest voice in the team. Going forwards from that, certainly not the guy where he's like the emotional leader in terms of EG, as in he like huddled all those guys together like, you're coming with me, guys, and I know you're inexperienced, but listen, I've been to the top and follow me, and everyone put it, and hey, get your, you know, it's not that sort of emotional leader. He's more the leader in terms of like, I'm a veteran, like here's some things I can tell you, like listen, you got to get fixed that, man. Like he would tell them basic things like that. Now how much of that is really going to help in Elements? I'm not really sure that much. Like I think the voices in Elements are kind of set in that particular sense. You can have a shot call and you could have some aspect there, but in terms of the stuff outside of that, I don't see Krepo actually having that effect. Not least because I think people have really oversold. In general, by the way, I've made this point already in the video, but I think the reason why people go so ham on this isn't just that they see Krepo on analysis desks, but that he comes off very well in interviews and he's very likable and people like his stream, etc. So they like him as a person so much that they ignore some of these aspects that don't exist there and project what they want him to be and believe he could be or think he is into areas where we don't have any basis to actually show that that's what he is. So in terms of being this vocal, mature leader, where is the example of that in the Evil Geniuses lineup that was in NA most recently? Remember when he left this vlog he made, blog actually, on his Facebook where he wrote out a lot of his issues that he'd had and a lot of the things that he thought were problems in the team. And actually, I made this point on Summoning Insight. It came off very passive-aggressive. Like, it came off in a certain way where for some reason other people didn't read it this way. They were all just like, oh, this is a great vlog, and like, I'm glad you just came out with what you thought about the team. But when I would read it, the way it was phrased was really made me actually ask a lot of questions, because I would have assumed he would have been more like that. Like, he'd get these young guys and he'd go like, listen, I know I'm not going to win LCS with these guys, but like with this guy over here, maybe I have to like challenge that guy and get him to like play great to prove something to me. With this other guy, maybe he lacks a bit of confidence, I have to bring him along. Maybe this other guy over here is like a project I have to work on and I have to get to know him personally, and then through doing that I'll be able to pass something. I thought he was going to be that sort of, basically, to make a joke, I didn't really think this, but I thought he was going to be like the character that Robin Williams played in Good Will Hunting, you know. And imagine that Matt Damon is like the young Pobelter, and he's got all this potential, but he's just wasting it away in this dead-end blue-collar job. as a streamer and player for a shit NLCS team. And along comes Krepo. Listen, he's not the most talented guy in the world. He's not the smartest guy in the world, but he's got a bit of nous. He knows how to use it. And he mentors this young guy. And he gets through to him in a way that, the Curse guys couldn't. And no one else could. He gets through to him. Eventually, they form this bond. And Pobelta realizes his potential. Now, I have joking there, but in a basic sense, he could have played a mentor role to these guys. Yet when you read that blog, the way it was phrased was kind of telling. Like, there was a section in it where he talks about the fact that, like, I wanted to duo queue. I can't remember the wording of it, but it was along the lines of, like, the gist was he wanted to duo queue with Altec, and he wanted to play with him, and I think maybe other players he might have mentioned, I can't remember. He wanted to duo with Altec and get practice and work on their synergy and stuff. But the reason it didn't happen, and the reason he was annoyed at Altec, is that Altec had never asked him to duo. Now think of the phrasing of that. You're the veteran guy. You're the guy with the experience. You're the guy who's been there. You're the mentor figure. You're the leader in this sense, if that's what we're placing you as. And here's a young guy on his first team, playing some of his first LCS games, who maybe doesn't know what he's doing, maybe has his own ideas, but some of them are wrong. That's where you go to him and you say, listen, if you're going to be on this team with me, you have to duo with me. We have to work on this. This isn't something I'm going to tell you once. I'm going to tell you multiple times. And at the end of the day, if I tell you all these times and I express to you and I try to get through to you in all these different ways and you don't do it, fine. I don't have any responsibility left there. It was your own fault. You wouldn't do it. I gave you every chance. Instead, it sounds quite passive-aggressive. Like, instead, he was just sort of like, well... Like, the reason I say passive-aggressive is it's the kind of behaviour, unfortunately, and people are going to get mad over this, that, like, actually women sometimes manifest, where they'll get upset over something where you haven't actually done anything wrong. But what you've done wrong is to not do something that they wanted you to do. And here's where, as a man, you'd be like, well, why didn't you just ask me to do it? Well, I wanted you to do it without me asking, because that carries all these implications of, like, well, do you really care about them? And if you really did like me, then you'd know that I wanted this done and you'd do it anyway. And if I have to ask you, then that doesn't count. And there's all these weird implications. And so the point I'm making here is this isn't really the sort of veteran leadership that we're looking for in men. This sort of male... almost this sort of solar phallic energy of, like, leadership, and it unites people and raises a certain consciousness. This isn't really what we just saw from Krepo and Evil Genius, is the basic point. That went a bit digression there, but whatever. He's not that sort of person as far as we can tell. So I don't think he's going to come into Elements and have this big radical change within that sense. And obviously he's had issues with teammates. Like, it sounds like with some of these teammates, yeah, there were just issues with some of them, and he wasn't necessarily the guy who confronted people and who made this, like that's one of the things about guys who are assholes, right? You remember the famous Saint Vicious video where he was going in on Elements? Yes, he chose the wrong way to go in on Elements. And actually, looking at Elements' personality, that wasn't the way Elements was going to respond. Some other players might have responded in the team to that. That was only going to cause a rift with him and Elements and make Elements kind of pissed off and not want to do stuff just because Saint's, like, annoying him in that way. But at least... one thing I'll give Saint credit for is he wasn't going to accept this particular problem, which was Elements wasn't practicing enough and wasn't practicing his role enough and solo queuing and figuring out what he had to do in that current meta. He wasn't just going to sit around and wait till the end of the split, wait for them to lose, wait for everything to go wrong, wait for Elements to make all these mistakes that Saint might not be making and might not be a reason for. Then once they've lost, sit back and go... yeah, well, we could have won if he'd have done that. And if he'd have just... why didn't he fix his problems? And if he'd have just come to me and asked for one, and he didn't do any of that stuff. What he did was, he saw this problem. He saw this is going to be a real issue. If I'm going to be on a team and I want to succeed, I can't have this issue. Therefore, I'm going to confront this matter, and I'm going to make it so that this has to be addressed. Now, whether it gets addressed in the sense that guy refuses to do anything, he won't do anything, we have to cut him, we have to get him off the team, that's another matter entirely. But Saint at least was going to make this a point that this had to happen. And that's because Saint was a leadership figure in this sense. Now, the leadership might have been skewed through a prism of, like, poorly expressed or choosing the wrong time or doing it while you're, like, half cut, etc. That means, like, drunk, by the way, if you're from another country. In this particular scenario, that might not be the right way to do it, but the intention in its own weird way was correct. That is correct in a leadership sense. That is the way you have to approach certain people, and you have to have that asset. We haven't seen that displayed from Krepo in this sense, so I don't think he's going to come in and challenge Frog and then put him to the test in this way and make sure that Shook knows he has to engage in that sense, and that's your job to do that. And Reckless, what do you do? Get in here, have more damage, like, we're going to commit and do it all. I don't know that he's really going to be that way. Put it this way, he's not going to come in and give an Al Pacino, like, get the life's a game of inches style speech that's going to turn fucking Elements around and then they're all just going to go out and win the big game. That's probably not going to happen. I do think he can be more of an aspect He's going to be more vocal than Nif, I imagine, in the team. That can be great. This is all no problem there. But don't overhype it to him. He's going to be this great aspect in that sense. Because I think people have taken, again, his likable personality, ability to explain things there, and assumed that's how it is in game and in the team environment, and that he has this great effect there. Not necessarily the case. Now, as a player, let's talk about him. As a player, get ready for this. This is the part you're going to get upset at, guys. Shakers ready, everyone. Lots of salt on my fish and chips. Krepo, as a support player, historically is worse than Nif. And right now, as far as I am aware, is probably worse than Nif. And people can get as mad as that as they want. Historically, Nif is a greater support player. His consistency level is very impressive. The number of top teams he's played in is impressive. Yet, not playing with godlike AD carries a lot of his career. And he's done very well. And he's always managed to do decently, and he's been one of the better supports that all these AD carries have had. He's managed to synergize in teams. He's never been a problem within teams. He's had a lot of positives going for him. He actually has underrated mechanical skills. Just because he makes a mechanical misplay does not mean his mechanical skills are weak. I don't know where that logic has come from, because people don't use that logic when they apply it to people like fucking Bjergsen, etc. when he makes a misplay. He's a mechanical god, but he still makes fucking huge mechanical misplays. People go way too far on that shit. So Krepo isn't at the same level overall as Nif in that sense. Now then, Krepo's not that far off, and he has some good, at times with certain champions, he has a good mechanical level. He had some decent laning when he was with Altec. People have overblown the Altec period, by the way. Yeah, but they really got it together. And at the end of the season on the Super Week, they won a whole bunch of games. Who gives a fuck about Super Week wins, man? Yeah, Gambit with that shit lineup with Cubon won a whole bunch of games and went like 4-1 or something on their last week. Are you suggesting that Gambit was really good? Are you suggesting that fucking Cubon was some elite top laner then? No. First of all, Super Weeks are a joke. They're the most varied weeks possible, where teams that bomb week after week, where you play 2 games, 3 games, 2 games, just bomb them completely, can just win all 5 games. What does that make up for everything then? The week where you practice the least for each opponent, and there's a lot more randomness, and you might play like opponents one after another, and depending on what order you play the harder team, and you might win, you might lose. Why would we give so much more credit to that than the rest of the split? That's ridiculous. And it was at the end when it didn't matter anymore. They couldn't win. They couldn't get in the playoffs anymore. And at the end, and for some of the teams, some of those games wouldn't even have fucking mattered in terms of placing and whatnot, and they're already in the playoffs and all the rest of that shite. So people have given way too much credit to that. Now, he did have a decent bot lane with Altec. It was one of the better bot lanes. I have to say, mainly because of Altec, and you're seeing that now. Altec was actually doing pretty well. He seemed like he was a promising talent. I don't really know how much Krepo accentuated Altec's ability or helped him along in that sense. It's hard to really tell. They didn't play together very long, and Altec's still doing well now, and had been a talent prospect before that. So I don't know that you can give all the credit over to Krepo. No, he was doing well at the time, Krepo, and his mechanics looked pretty good at the time. He had a decent champion pool going. They weren't winning games, aside from that last week. So in general, I wouldn't go too far on that one. With that said, though, I think Krepo's a decent laner. He has a good understanding of matchups. He has a good understanding of build paths. He has his own philosophy on it, crucially. Seems pretty decent at giving communication to the team, so junglers know when to interact with them, etc. How to interact with the mid lane. Is he a good roamer? Yeah, I'm not really sure that we can say that. We haven't really seen that in his career, I don't think. I don't think he can take that aspect, which is one of the more modern day Neo support components of what makes a great player, we have to say. In terms of as a laner, people are going to think to themselves, okay, well, Nif was this passive player. He's got Reckless here. He's duo queued with Forgiven. Maybe he can be the guy who brings out some aggression in Reckless and makes them a really dominant lane team and makes them this strength. Where's the evidence for that in Krepo's career? Yeah, they had a good thing going in with Altec. First of all, there weren't very many good AD carries in North America at that time. That's just a fact. Go have a look. Secondly, this is a guy who played a lot of his career with Yellow Pete. So I do think Yellow Pete held him back a bit. He wanted to be a bit more aggressive, but I also think his philosophy wasn't to be super aggressive like that. I don't think that's his style. If you asked him now, that's not his philosophy in the game. It should take all these battles and take 40, 60 chances and just try and turn it and all the rest of it. I think he's got, in general, a bit more of a, I won't say entirely passive. I'd say more like slightly conservative approach, where he'd rather focus on objectives and things like this and take the opportunity that makes more sense than the one that initially necessarily presents itself and you could do if you did a sick outplay. I don't think he's that sort of player. So I don't think he's going to revolutionize the bot lane in that sense. I think he could be better for Reckless. I think maybe he'll understand better what to give to Reckless, and he can bring a little bit out of Reckless. I don't think he's going to transform it though. He can play engaged supports, which again, that was an issue they had. Now Nif could play some of them as well, but an issue that Elements lacked as well was engage. Like they needed in the past seasons, they needed either Shook to engage all the time, or they had to force Wicked to engage, as in just get into situations where no one's engaging. And Wicked used to just go into like 4 people, and then they'd all back out, and he'd just be getting wrecked on his own and killed. They had to either do it like that, or they needed the support to do it. And Nif, to some degree, yes, he could play Thresh, etc., but he wasn't entirely that sort of player. And if he did do it, unfortunately, then they'd back off and Nif would be the one to get killed. So I think Krepo could bring something in that respect. I think overall, it's something worth trying, okay? I don't mind it's something worth trying. I just don't see all these massive upsides and amazing projections of Krepo, the amazing Mata-style shot caller, and then the godlike laner who's going to bring out all this in Reckless, and then this mature voice in the team who's going to encourage everyone and rally the troops and all this. I don't see any of that in his history. I don't see any of that in his character. I don't see any of that manifested or given as an example or shown to be realistic anywhere except for in the fevered dreams of people who want Elements to be really good and love Krepo simultaneously.